So I've got my quarter sawn oak. So basically it's 7 inches wide. It's kind of rough. It's a rough width right now. So I'm going to cut them into 34-inch lengths, and then I'll after I get done cutting them, I'm going to basically take the 3 pieces that I have here, and I'm going to glue them up together, and then I can run them through my joiner and square everything up. Okay, so let's get to gluing. So I'm going to basically lay down the glue on the board, and I'll just spread it out and get these guys glued up together. So I'm getting ready to basically clamp this guy together. So now I got all the chop basically glued up. I'm going to place it. I'll place it in my large end vise, which is something I built in another YouTube video. So if you want to watch it, it's on my channel. So I'm just squaring this up a little bit, and I'll clamp it down. As you can see, there's some bow in those boards, and that's kind of the main reason I ended up using this large vise. I want to make sure I can get those guys flat. So I've got it set down with the big vise on the bottom, and then I'll put a bunch of those smaller clamps on the top to make sure that I get all the bow out of the boards. Then after that, basically what I'm going to do is I'll be running this, which is the chop, I'll be running it through my joiner to square it up, and then I'll basically rip it down to the right size with my table saw. So I left this sit overnight. Everything should be pretty dry. So I'll just take all the clamps off, and after that we'll get it ready to go through the joiner. Okay, so basically I'm going to run it through my jointer, and I'll get it all squared up. And after I get it done with this, it's off to the table saw. So now I'm basically just going to rip the chop down to the final width, which for mine is going to be 6.5 inches. Alright, so now that I got my the chop ripped to the right width, I'm basically going to cut the ends off, just get it squared up. And again, I'm cutting it at 34 inches. So I'll just cut one side and then I'll do the other. Okay, this is just a layout that I made just to kind of show it on the video to give you a little bit more idea. So the key issue I wanted to figure out was where to put the hole at, how long to make the chop, where to put the tapers in for the chop. So this kind of shows just the basic dimensions that I end up using. So I'll have a picture at the end of the video you can see with more specifics on it. And this paper I'm showing right now is basically, it's from a website called Benchcrafted, which makes or sells the leg vise hardware. Pretty pricey stuff. It's several $100s if you wanted to buy it. But they have a guide for it, and it has a lot of good, useful information that I wanted to use. So I would recommend, if you're going to make this, I would go to their website. Take a look at it. There's a lot of stuff in it, a lot of good hints, a lot of good stuff about dimensions. So take a look at that, and hopefully you'll find it useful. I know I did. So basically, I'm just setting up the my drill press, and I'm going to be drilling a couple holes into this guy. So the first hole I'm drilling is a 2 1/8 inch hole, and I'm going to go down just about a 1/2 inch deep. The second drill is 1 1/8 inch. That's going to go all the way through. So the reason I had to drill the first hole to 2 1/8 is because on the actual screw itself, there is a convex section on it that will sit in that, which is actually works out kind of nicely because it helps center the screw when you put it in the hole. So what I'm setting up to do now is I'm trying to cut the end of the tapers off. Unfortunately, I don't have a bandsaw, so this is a little bit more difficult. But so I'm cutting it with my table saw to get the majority of the cut. So I'll cut both sides on the long side as far as I can go. Then I'll actually use my table saw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put it at an angle to cut it. So I can get basically it's a 45 on here. So that'll cut that small angle out, and then I'll take it over to my other vise, and I'll clamp it down, and I'll just use my jigsaw to cut out the remaining piece of the wood. So basically, I've got it clamped into my large end vise clamp, and I'm just going to take my jigsaw and I'm going to cut out both sides to get the material I couldn't reach with my table saw. So now I'm just basically going to put a bevel on here. I cut it at, I think it was about 30 degrees, just to give it a little bit of a look on the front. So this is just my parallel guide. So I'm just ripping it down. It's going to be, I believe it's 3.5 inches wide. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I'm just hogging out the material. I'm making the mortise on the bottom of the chop. So I got a 5/8 inch Forstner bit in it, and I'm cutting it about 2 1/8 inches long. Then after I get done with this, then I'll just chisel it out to square it up, and that's where the parallel guide will end up going. So now what I'm doing, I'm basically taking, this is the end of the parallel guide, and I'm making the tenon. What I did is I scored it, and then I'm going to just use my my joiner to take off the right thickness material, so that'll get the long sides down. After that, basically I'm just going to run it back through my table saw to take the ends down to get the width to the right dimension. So I've got it clamped to my bench, and I'm just going to chisel out this mortise to get it all squared up, and that's where the parallel guide will press into. Okay, so I got everything pretty well squared in and a pretty good fit. And I'm just going to dry fit it and just make sure everything sits in flush, and that the parallel guide is indeed parallel, because it's critical that it has to be parallel to the chop. And everything looks pretty good. So I'm basically going to counterbore the end of the chop. So this is where the parallel guide is going to go through. So I'm just counterboring, and I'm going to drill through with a 5/8 inch drill bit, and that's where the chop will attach to the parallel guide. So what I'm doing is I've got the actual parallel guide put in, and I've got it all squared perfectly so that I'm drilling it through, because you want that parallel guide to be in perfect alignment. This one through, so as you can see, I've got 5/8 inch bolts put in. So I stuck one in just to make sure that it's set right, and then I'm going to drill at the second hole. So now what I'm doing is I'm drilling the parallel guide out. So the parallel guide looks like Swiss cheese when you get done with it. But basically I'm drilling 5/8 inch holes, and I'm drilling them. They're spaced basically 5/16 on center, So there's 3 holes that are offset by 5/16 of an inch each. So I'm just going down and I made up a quick little template just to make it easy for me. So I'm going to go through here and cut a ton of holes. And again, this is for the parallel guide. So when you have it installed in your bottom of your leg vise, that's where you're going to put the bolt or whatever you use, a screwdriver, whatever you use to hold it, to keep your vise parallel. So now what I'm doing, I just put a countersink bit in, and I'm just going to countersink all the holes. It just cleans up the holes and makes it easier when you're gonna put the stop into the hole. So what I'm doing now is as I'm drilling out the holes. So this is where the metal screw is going to get attached to the chop itself, and you can kind of see there's a nice hole. That's that large 2 1/8 inch hole I drilled about a 1/2 inch deep. So that sits nice and flush in there. And again, it also helps center it. So I got everything basically all centered up. I think it's pretty critical. I took my time doing that to get that right. So this is looking at the back of there's a board that's going to mount on on my bench. So this is that board. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to attach the back end of the screw, which would be like the nut side of the screw, on there. So again, I was pretty careful to make sure I got this exactly centered with where the chop hole was, because that's pretty critical. You want those to line up pretty much straight on. So these are just the rollerblade wheels I bought, and I'm just cutting them down. I wanted to narrow them up. They're a little wide, so I'm just going to cut 2 of these wheels down to size just to make it fit a little bit better into the carriers I'll be building in a minute. Okay, so this was me rambling on about some stuff, and I had to cut this video down. It's getting way too long. So anyway, you can kind of see I'm kind of discussing the issue with building the roller guides for the parallel guide. So I did have some issues doing it. I ended up just making it out of some 3/4 inch oak. So we'll go through that in a minute. And I'll speed this along. So this is just one of the blocks. So this is going to be part of the carrier for the wheels. I'm just going to show a little bit of it here. So I'm just cutting it down. You'll kind of see it at the end here, and we'll look at it. Okay, so I'm basically just drilling out the hole through the carriers. So there's 4 of these little pieces, and so there'll be a 5/8 inch bolt that I'll run through to act as the axle through the wheels. So this is the bottom, showing where the guide's going to be. Then as I flip it over, you'll see there'll be another one of these rollers that'll be on the other side that rides along the parallel guide. So I'm drilling out some holes for putting some metal inserts, and these metal inserts will be so I can screw and attach because I'm going to need to adjust those roller guides that I'm going to be installing. So there's one on the front and the back, so that's where they'll mount into, and I can easily adjust those and get those set at the right height to make sure that they keeps that parallel guide parallel. So what this shows is I got my router set up with the 1/4 inch bit, and I need to route a slot. So that's going to be the plate that's going to be the carrier for the wheels. So basically what I'm doing, I've just taken a bunch of passes. I don't want to go too high with that bit. So I'm basically raising up a little bit, taking a couple passes. And then eventually I'll come all the way through with it and make the entire slot. I've got a Forstner bit in, so I'm drilling a bunch of holes in those little plates. So I'm just countersinking the holes because they're going to have to mount into the onto the side of the carrier. So what I'm doing now is I'm drilling more holes, because here, this is where I countersunk through. So I'm attaching that bottom plate onto the rails that'll hold the actual wheels. So this is just showing the completed wheel assembly. So as you can see, I've got the threaded insert in the back. So those will just attach, and will be on one on the front and one on the other side. So this is just a view. I've got basically the main plate that I had off mounted with all the holes in it. You can see I've got the both the wheels on the front and the back, and everything's set up to go. So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to dry fit this in, and hopefully everything will fit together. So as I'm putting that in there, I've got to get that screw lined up with the nut that's on the back of that board. So it takes a little bit to get it aligned perfectly. And right now I don't have the wheels adjusted yet. So once I get them adjusted, it'll tighten that up, and it won't be as, you can kind of see there's some slop in the bottom, and that parallel guide is not being held parallel. So what I'm going to do is, after I get this all put in, I'll adjust those the two wheels up and down to get those perfectly parallel. So I'm just going to kind of show you the operation of it now that I get everything all set perfectly. So I've got a couple pieces of wood in here I'll throw in. So that's just a 4x4 piece of wood. It works pretty well. You can see I'm putting in the parallel guide. The base, I'm just using a screwdriver. But it does clamp really nicely. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The one thing I have yet to do on it, I'll have to stain it and seal this thing up. Also, the handle is just an old broomstick, so I'll eventually replace that, and hopefully that'll finish it up. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. Please leave any comments, any suggestions. I'm always willing to try to make some improvements. And if you want to subscribe, that'd be great too. So thanks for watching.